This episode of the Hardwood Knocks podcast is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline, the fastest, easiest, and safest way to bet on all things sports. With March Madness, the Masters, and Major League Opening Day right around the corner, BetOnline has all the latest news, scores, and odds to help you win big. The best part? You'll receive a 50% welcome bonus with your first deposit. That's literal free money. Head over to betonline.ag and use our promo code BLUEWIRE, all one word, to receive that literal free money. Plus, signing up is a great way to support the Hardwood Knocks podcast, which you're listening to in your ears right this very second. And even if you hate listening to us, go to betonline.ag, promo code BLUEWIRE. Again, that's promo code BLUEWIRE, all one word, when you sign up at betonline.ag. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. What is poppin', loyal Hardwood Knocks listeners? I am Dan Favale coming at you with my super duper, incredibly esteemed, awesome times awesome, fantabulous, spectaculario. Cannot believe the Utah Jazz backed out of putting Mike Conley on the bench, co-host Andrew D. Bailey. Before we get started,
cannot believe it, but keep going.
Still stunned. He is still stunned. Before we get into the second part of our free agency rankings, or what we're hoping is the final part as well, although there could be a third part depending on how quickly or not so quickly we get through this, the usual housekeeping notes. First and foremost, please continue rating, reviewing, and subscribing to us on iTunes. We can be found wherever else you are consuming your podcast as well. Rate, review, subscribe to us there, whatever you can do. But iTunes still helps us out the most. So if you want to be a superhero and you listen to us on Spotify, also go over to iTunes and rate, review, and subscribe to us there. Subscribing is the most important thing. The ratings that we can track that are going up, downloading all of our episodes. We appreciate every single one of you who do that. If you have done all those things and are downloading us consistently, as in all the time, please refer us, retweet the promotions that we have, tell friends, frenemies, friends, acquaintances, coworkers, random people on the street. I can't even get through it. There's so many people you could tell about us. Also follow us on YouTube. Go to youtube.com, search Hardwood Knocks. We will pop up. Subscribe to us there and like all of our videos. Follow us on Twitter at Hardwood Knocks. Then go ahead and follow Andy on Twitter at Andrew D. Bailey. I am at Dan Favale, Favale. And follow Blue Wire on Twitter as well, at Blue Wire Pods. I'm dropping fire tweets and opinions over there 7 days a weck, basically. So at Blue Wire Pods. Last but certainly not least, shout out to today's sponsor. Basically a sponsor always, betonline.ag. They are fantastic. You'll be hearing from them shortly. Andy, how the hell are you doing?
I am doing well. Ready to talk about some more free agency destinations. Like you said, I was thrown for a little bit of a loop by the Jazz news earlier today. You don't expect to get a Twitter notification from Shams about a Jazz lineup move. So that was interesting.
Let alone two.
Yeah. A correction. It was kind of funny to say, well, they're pulling Conley out of the starting lineup, and then like an hour or two later, actually they changed their mind. Something just feels a little off about that, but whatever.
Maybe they just realized they're paying him $32.5 million. Maybe BetOnline AG has odds on how many games Mike Conley will start the rest of the season. Over under of like 10 or something.
If they don't, they should, because I'm sure they listen to this podcast and they're going to put it in after they hear that.
Jazz's championship odds on betonline.ag, those probably aren't looking so hot these days. Just throwing that out there.
No, I saw, I don't know where it was from, but I saw updated championship odds the other day, and they're down to like 9th or 10th, which feels right.
Yeah, the defense has started to show some cracks, and they've had some pretty bad losses.
Yeah, it's been a rough go.
This is a free agency podcast, though. Some nice evergreen content for everyone. We're moving on to the teams. We can call them in-between teams. We're calling them, though, here, the non-taxpayer mid-level exception teams. As we reiterated last time, these rankings, we do have tiers. They're based on a ton of factors, the ease with which they can fit in free agents. The market location doesn't really matter too much unless it's just, you have to account for it, like it's Los Angeles. We're also just looking at immediate and long-term outlooks, what would be most appealing to free agents, assuming they're looking to win, or are they more appealing because maybe they'll have minutes for youngsters? There are squads here, as we mentioned on the last podcast when we did the mini MLE teams and the cap space teams. There are squads here that can actually move up a tier depending on what happens with contracts. The Cleveland Cavaliers, for instance, are in here, but they enter max space territory if Drummond opts out. We're making certain team decisions and player option decisions here, which is how we've come up with this tier. So it's with this group. So it's subject to change, and I'll note it wherever it's most notable. But overall, I feel like most of these teams, if not all of them, are going to end up working with the non-taxpayers mid-level exception, which is worth about $9.8 million this summer. And in a market where there, one, aren't a ton of really good free agents, and two, there's even less cap space floating around, the full MLE could end up being quite valuable. Andy, are you ready for... I have 7 tiers here. So this is tier 7. In a tier of their own. Are you ready?
The teams that are just going to be having free agents line up for them, I'm sure.
Tier 7, the Cleveland Cavaliers. They are also number 20 in these rankings if we want to go by that. But tier 7 alone, the Cavs. My reasoning here is they will become infinitely more appealing if they can get to around max territory should Andre Drummond. I was about to call him DeAndre Drummond. That was really weird. If he opts out, I just don't see him declining the $28.8 million player option. I think I said this on the last podcast. I don't want to take.
And how much more appealing do they become if they do get a max?
Well, spot? Because then you can go after like a Malik Beasley, like a Bogdan Bogdanovic, like just someone who's they at least have money to throw. Like that's their actual call it like a trounce card, where it's, hey, we can offer you more money than most of the other teams in the league, where now they don't really have that luxury. But even if he leaves, and I actually won't go through it again because we went through it on the last podcast about why we think he's going to opt in. We just don't think the long-term money is going to be worth it for him this summer. The lack of direction here, like you have Andre Drummond, you have Kevin Love. Are you going to look to bring back Tristan Thompson if you don't buy him out since this pod is releasing before March 1st? Are you going to find a taker for Kevin Love? Darius Garland has kind of perked up a little bit in recent weeks. I'm also Cavs fans seem to be big believers in Kevin Porter Jr. I'm a little bit indifferent to him, though it seems like from the Cavs games that I've seen, it does seem like he could end up being a pretty fairly high-level shot creator. I kind of think that Colin Sexton is, I don't know what the word would be, but like people might be too hard on him at this point where it feels like he's been miscast a ton in Cleveland. But you just factor in these warring timelines internally when you look at the vets and the youngsters, compared with the fact that they can't figure out what they're doing at head coach, I guess, after losing John Beilein. Now they have JB Bickerstaff there. Larry Drew didn't even want to coach this team last year after they fired Tyronn Lue. They just don't feel like a beacon of stability right now, and they still seem to lack that blue chip prospect that would make them, or that could serve as another free agency draw. It just really feels like this team is lacking in the curb appeal department.
Yeah, I mean, I think guys around the league are going to be dying to play with Dante Exum, but I generally take your point. I think Colin Sexton's probably been a little bit unfairly maligned as well, and I'm probably guilty of that to a certain degree. I think they've been a little bit better. I think somebody actually asked me about the Cavs in a radio spot recently, and I half joked about the JB Bickerstaff bump, but it does seem like they've been a little bit better since he took over, and I think that happens a lot of times with interim coaches. For whatever reason, players are just a little bit more motivated to go out there and work hard for the first little bit under an interim coach. But the season on balance, how often possessions are just dominated by Sexton and Garland is not very appealing for me to watch. And so I can't imagine it's terribly appealing for upcoming free agents either. So I think they are appropriately ranked. If you had all 30 teams, they'd probably still be near the bottom. But of this group that has the non-taxpayer MLE, I think 20 is very appropriate for Cleveland.
Yeah, and I don't even think they get that much more attractive should they trade Kevin Love and sort of commit to more of a direction. Not that they're necessarily not committed.
They're a long way away.
Yeah, so they just seem to be in a very odd place right now. Moving on to tier 6, which will be 19. The number 19 team on this list, the Washington Wizards, 18, Orlando Magic, 17, Sacramento Kings, and 16, Chicago Bulls. Did Siri want to chime in there for a minute?
Siri wanted to get in on the action. I shut her down.
That's the second time in like 4 podcasts that Siri's really trying to just infringe
Wasn't it
upon
you
our
last
podcasting.
time?
No, it was Siri.
Well, wasn't it your Siri?
What's that?
Wasn't it your phone who chimed in last time?
Yeah, it was my Apple Watch actually. It was Siri. I took it off and threw it across the room. Yeah, so
we might have to shut our watches off when we record. Siri's she's got some serious Badinsky tendencies right now.
So just to re-deliver those numbers, tier 6, the number 19, the Wizards, 18, the Orlando Magic, 17, Sacramento Kings, and 16, Chicago Bulls. Do you think that? How do you feel about that order? I'm just looking at these teams, and I feel like there's a chance the Kings and the Bulls could technically be higher, but I don't know that Sacramento's shown enough progress this year. They're like sort of quietly hanging around the playoff conversation. If you talk yourself into a healthy Bagley, you have De'Aaron Fox, you're going to assume that Bogdanovich is coming back. You have Richaun Holmes. Maybe they could end up being higher. I just don't. If the money's going to be equal elsewhere, I'm not sure. The Bulls, I guess if they go through a front office overhaul, like a lot of people expect them to, perhaps they can be a little bit more appealing.
Or a coaching overhaul.
I actually think the team here with the highest variance is the Wizards. And the problem is that you're not really going to know until maybe after free agency, but you're definitely not going to know what John Wall is until after the fact. And then Bradley Beal, if you can guarantee that he's going to stay there, then I think that makes them a far more intriguing destination because Beal and John Wall, having both of them, you do, and if you re-sign Davis Bertans, you look at this as potentially or a should-be playoff team in the East next year.
Yeah, when you went through the grouping or the teams in this group, initially my first thought is maybe I'd have Washington a little bit higher. I think if I was trying to do this list from the perspective of the free agents, I feel like the names John Wall and Bradley Beal might carry some weight with free agents. So I could see them being a little bit higher. But like you said, there's a chance that Beal won't be there. Who knows what John Wall is going to be by the time he comes back. So I can see why there would be some reticence there. Chicago is, for as many issues as they've had this season, and the most recent one was Zach LaVine cussing out his coach in the middle of the game and then launching from the logo on the next possession. Like it's a legit mess in Chicago right now. But the roster, like theoretically, the top 5, 6, 7 guys in that rotation still makes a lot of sense to me. Like, if it's healthy, a lineup of Satoransky, LaVine, Porter, Markkanen, and Carter is interesting. And if you were a mid-level exception guy who was coming in to supplement that, I can see how that would be appealing. And I don't know how much free agents take this into account in professional sports, but there is a lot of history with the Chicago Bulls. Certainly not like a Lakers or Celtics level franchise, but it's one of the storied franchises in the league, and it's a big market. It's not warm like Miami or anything like that, but I can see how Chicago would be appealing. The other ones are just kind of meh to me in this group. It would be interesting to know what kind of reputation Luke Walton has among players at this point. It seems like he was very much seen as a player's first type of a coach when he was running the Warriors for that half season. I don't know if that's still the case or not. And then Orlando just feels like they've been stuck at the same spot for so long. And I don't really know what it's going to take to shake them out of it.
Yeah, Orlando seems like they need just a point guard who can shoot that isn't as undersized as a healthy DJ Augustine.
Yeah, like I was going to say, Augustine was that last year, but he's just really small.
They're going to sign Jeff Teague this summer, aren't they? That's how this all ends.
Or they're going to fix Markelle Fultz's shot. Come on.
The Bulls are interesting too for those reasons that you had pointed out, and for the Wizards, just really quickly, they have $70+ million committed to Bradley Beal and John Wall, and then plus Bertans' cap hold.
Yeah, that's crazy.
What takes them into mid-level money, essentially, where it makes more sense for them to operate as an over-the-cap team. I almost worry that the fact you didn't trade Bertans, you're probably going to keep him. I wonder how much he costs. I guess it helps again that there's just not a ton of cap space floating around out there. But if you have to end up paying, market value for him in a normal summer, that's going to be pretty pricey. But for Chicago, the argument there is as much as people hate Jim Boylan, don't like the way that he fails to adjust to their defensive approach, as much as they don't like seeing like Zach LaVine everything on offense, and that's really not his fault. Kobe White's been hot lately, but they really just need Zach LaVine to do so much. Wendell Carter Jr., LaVine himself, Markkanen, and Otto Porter Jr., they didn't play together last year after the trade deadline, and injuries across the board this year have limited them to just 257 possessions this season. So there's still that intrigue there. And so maybe they're the team that I feel like has the highest variant ceiling. But all these teams sort of feel to some degree stuck in the mud. And maybe what helps the Kings the most is that they probably have the player on their roster with the single most upside from this group when you're looking at De'Aaron Fox. I don't know that you could say the same about – you definitely can't say the same about anybody on the Magic. Bradley Beal and John Wall are in their primes. The Bulls, I guess depending on how you feel about Wendell Carter Jr. and Markkanen still at this point.
It's probably Fox, yeah.
But you kind of talked me into bumping the Bulls up. If I had to bump anybody up, I could see putting them a tier or two ahead of this.
Before you jump to that next tier real quick, I just happened across this number the other day. When Bertans and Beal are on the floor for the Wizards, they're scoring 122.4 points per 100 possessions, which is 99th percentile.
That's a lot of points per 100 possessions.
Yeah. Bertans, he's going to be a good fit next to Beal and Wall if they keep him there. And if Wall's like 85% of what he was before all the injuries. But I don't think there's any like egregious errors in the order there.
It would be kind of funny if Washington stumbled ass backwards into a playoff spot this season.
Well, they're pretty much done this year, right? Didn't they just lose a critical game? I don't know what the odds are at this point.
Bradley Beal scored 50 plus points in consecutive games. They lost both.
And they lost both of them, yeah.
They did just beat the Nets the night that we're recording this, and they're only 4 games back in the loss column of the 8 seed Orlando Magic.
Down to a 9% chance of making the playoffs, according to 538, for whatever that's worth. But
Pelicans have like a 70% chance right now, right? According to 538, which is just wild.
And they've been really high for a while now, so this could end up being like a nice little win for their model if they make it.
When the Pelicans were going through, I think it was that 13-game losing streak, 538 still had them as like a 48% playoff
it was
chance.
crazy.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
Moving on to this next tier, number 15, this is tier 6. Number 15, the Spurs. Number 14, the Phoenix Suns. Number 13, the Minnesota Timberwolves. I'm going to just start out with this. I want to just, instead of me justifying this, I want to hear your from-scratch thoughts, but I am going to say I considered putting the Spurs in tier 6 as opposed to tier 5.
You wouldn't have gotten much argument from me. I think the luster has very much worn off the Spurs. They just lost again here to the Mavericks. It wasn't a surprising loss, but I think their playoff chances are down to 3% on 538, and even that feels a little bit high to me. I think they're done, and I think they've consigned themselves to mediocrity with what they've done over the last 2 or 3 years. And I don't know if they're going to be a free agent attraction to anyone this coming summer. So I would have been fine with them being in that tier 6. The Suns are actually pretty interesting to me this season. I'm going to go back to the lineups again. I looked at this the other day when I was trying to make myself feel better about them destroying the Jazz in Utah. But when Booker's on the floor with Rubio and Ayton, they're actually really good. This is another team that hasn't had a ton of opportunities to play with all their guys, kind of like you were saying with Chicago. I mean, Ayton had the 25-game suspension, so that it took him a while to kind of get up and running after that. But again, those 3 guys are Booker, Rubio, and Ayton. When they're all on the floor, almost 1,000 possessions, and they're plus 9.7 per 100 possessions, which is 94th percentile. So if you're looking at a young up and coming core, Booker, Ayton is a great 1-2 punch, and if you want to be kind of like the third guy there, and if you're a mid-level exception guy, you're probably not going there to be the third guy. Maybe you're going to go be the 5th, 4th, 5th, 6th guy. Um, I am cautiously optimistic about the Suns. I think they've had a little bit better season than people realize. And then with Minnesota, another team with a really interesting 1-2 punch in terms of young guys with Karl Anthony Towns and D'Angelo Russell. And in that case, well, I guess this is the same in Phoenix too. I was going to say Towns is locked up for the next 5 years, but Booker's on an extension too. So if you're a free agent and you're looking for young, intriguing talent, I think both of those teams offer pretty interesting fits. The Timberwolves and the Suns.
I definitely find the Suns more appealing than the Timberwolves, and they probably have the strongest case of these three to bump up a tier. I think they probably become more appealing if they're not working with money that's so comparable to the rest of the league, and that really only happens for them if they get rid of two from the Aaron Baines, Frank Kaminsky, Dario Saric trio. Frank Kaminsky has a team option. I just don't think you're going to let Baines and Saric walk for nothing. Even letting one of them go is without receiving compensation is sort of a waste of resources. Side note here, when I was watching the Jazz Suns game, there was a lineup that the Suns ran out where Dario Saric was at center, and I hadn't really seen much of that this year, so I looked that up. And
that works really well in that particular game too.
Well, they've played about 340 possessions like that. They have an offensive rating in the 67th percentile and a defensive rating in the 60th percentile, plus 3.1 points per 100 possessions overall. And Kelly Oubre Jr. and Cam Johnson seem to be like the members that populate the rest of the front court with him at the five. And they can even go like, yeah, they'd be small at the five, but if you played Bridges and Oubre and Cam Johnson together, like you're not really small everywhere else. And then Devin Booker's having a hell of a year as well. His efficiency has been absolutely wild. There are 53 players averaging at least 20 points per 75 possessions this year. He is third in true shooting percentage. That's incredible. Wow. 62.2 there for him. Tied with, has the identical true shooting percentage at this recording as James Harden. Maybe we could bump them up. I just don't. When you look at how daunting getting back to the playoffs in the West is, I don't know if they're going to be ready to get there by next year. Perhaps, maybe I'm just underestimating how much improvement that DeAndre Ayton has made defensively this year. So if you just have him continue along his current trajectory and have him, available the entire season as opposed to being suspended for more than a quarter of it. Maybe that changes the calculus a little bit. So I could see, I'm looking at the teams in front of them. I might put them above the Timberwolves right now. The Timberwolves just don't appeal to me as much. I don't know what their pathway necessarily is to having a league average defense around D'Angelo Russell and Karl Anthony Towns, unless they can. Yeah,
that's a big problem.
Yeah, Jarrett Culver needs to play more, and I don't think he's warranted that playing time this year. So he's a huge part of that. They have their draft pick this year, so there is that. But I think I'll bump the Suns ahead of the Timberwolves for now, and we'll see if I regret putting them this low.
Yeah, I think that all makes sense.
Tier number 4 has 4 teams in it. Number 12, I think we're up to. The 12th place team, the Oklahoma City Thunder. Number 11, Memphis Grizzlies. Number 10, Indiana Pacers. And number 9, Portland Trailblazers. Some notes here. The Thunder, I would put a lot higher if you could guarantee me that they're going to keep the band together, and you can't.
Yeah.
Adams and Schroeder are going to be on expiring contracts and theoretically easier to move over the summer. I think they'll re-sign Gallinari, but is it going to be with the intention to trade him in the middle of the season, or will it just be straight up as part of a sign and trade over the summer? I still think they'd move Chris Paul if they'd had the chance, and he's just been playing out of his mind this year. If you told me that they weren't going to make any moves, though, like they were going to move forward with this core, then I probably might bump them close. I might bump them into the top 10, definitely into the top 10, ahead of the Grizzlies and the Pacers. But the fact that we just can't guarantee what their direction is going to be after this season, and a lot might hinge on how they do in the playoffs. That's why I put them as the bottom team in this tier. The Grizzlies, I don't know if they're ready. I think it's been clear since Jaren Jackson Jr. went down that he might be their most impactful player, regardless of how good Ja Morant has been offensively for them this year. But you have Triple J, you have Brandon Clark, you have Ja Morant. Dylan Brooks has not been playing too well since signing his extension, but you have him. Kyle Anderson's solid. Jonas Valanciunas is solid. they're like that intriguing team where if you added a mid-level free agent there, like, yeah, maybe you could talk yourself into them making that 7-8 seed playoff push again. The Pacers are just ubiquitous in the postseason conversation, and they would have a really strong case to be in the top, 6 or 7 if you could guarantee that Victor Oladipo is going to be 90% of the offensive player that he was, not just prior to his injury, but in that 2017-2018 season. And I've only caught I think 2 full Pacers games since he returned, and then bits and pieces of another couple. He's looked basically fine on defense. It's the offensive efficiency has really yet to come together. The Blazers, I toyed with putting even higher. The opportunity to play with Damian Lillard, I just feel like is something that everyone could jump at. Look at what Carmelo Anthony has done after playing in empty gyms for over a year. Look at how much of an asset Hassan Whiteside has become in that locker room. And so, I mean, even look at what Rodney Hood was doing before his injury. You had Scala BCA before they traded him and he was injured, playing well. I like this team if they can make a significant wing addition, and perhaps this is the summer where they'll be able to do it.
Yeah, I think this tier makes a lot of sense, like the ones before it. I think with OKC, there's the added element of, again, I don't know how often free agents would think about this, but if you want to be a part of a team that's going to be maybe next wave, you look at all the draft picks that they have incoming. You look at Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Maybe you're a young-ish free agent and you want to get a fresh start. I think Oklahoma City would be a good place to do that. Memphis is very, very intriguing to me. They're better than I think most people expected this season, and they're just going to continue to get better. Obviously, young, talented, athletic group with Morant, Jackson, and Clark. I'm just intrigued by a lot of guys on that roster, but those three mostly. And I think both of these places are maybe a team for a guy that's just coming off his rookie contract. Maybe it didn't quite work out at his first location, and he wants a chance to grow with an intriguing young team. I think that would make sense for either of them. The Pacers are interesting to me. I mean, I don't know if they're super appealing, but they're always going to be in the playoffs. Like you said, I don't really see a path to title contention for them. But maybe that's not what all these free agents are going to be after. And then with Portland, what I was thinking about as you were talking and as you first mentioned them was I feel like their sort of cachet with players around the league has to be so high right now. They've got Damian Lillard, which is just huge in itself. I think it's well known throughout the league, not just by us in the media and fans, but he's truly one of the best leaders in basketball. He seems like a great guy to play with. And then what they've done for Carmelo Anthony this season, players love Carmelo Anthony. And so for them to be the team where he kind of came back and had this nice little redemption arc this season, I think that'll probably help them in some free agent conversations.
I have some follow-up questions here. So let me start with Carmelo Anthony, though. Do you think that he makes more than league minimum money next year?
Melo?
Yeah.
That's a tough question.
He did say he'd like to retire in Portland.
Yeah. I bet they re-sign him for more than the minimum.
Well, then they're going to eat into their mid-level exception, and that makes their roster, unless they're just banking on Collins and Nurkic being healthy and Hood being back. He's probably going to pick up that player option. I kind of think he's in Portland too, because why would you mess with it at this point? I don't know. Maybe if the Lakers end up trading Kuzma over the summer, they look at how he just played in Portland and are like, well, he could definitely do what Kyle Kuzma was doing for us.
Yeah, I could kind of. I think I might be able to see that. I don't know who other than here I am praising what they've done with Melo, and I've taken like 2 bites at the eating crow on that in this podcast in previous episodes, but I just don't know if there's a ton of teams that would pay him more than the minimum. That's a good question.
If he didn't care what market he was in, I think there are some teams that like you could end up talking yourself into a little bit. But like he's not going to go play for Orlando, So
yeah,
The other thing was I guess the Blazers seem like they can make two different types of trades. I don't think they deal CJ McCollum this summer as a sell move. It would have to be as part of a bigger blockbuster, just because I saw a report the other day that that Terry Stotts' job was safe, and I was kind of like, well, what the fuck? Like the Blazers just have had so many injuries. This isn't the season to judge anything that they're doing, really. Like if you want to be worried about Anthony Simons, okay, that's fine. But I just don't know how you go about saying if McCollum and Lillard hadn't run their course as of last year, I don't know how you then go into this summer saying, oh, well, we have to move McCollum now. They still could, but because they have Collins, they have Simons, they'll have some salary filler, particularly if they guarantee Ariza's deal. They could be a team that makes a win now trade, or there's the Pacers, where I think this is the summer they're going to bust up the Sabonis-Turner front court, and I think it's Turner that's going to end up going. What do you think is the more likely scenario? Is Indy sort of breaking up that Sabonis Turner tandem, or do you think that the Blazers are going to make a win now trade? I don't want to call it a blockbuster because I'm hesitant to say that they have the pieces really to do that. But I could talk myself into being more optimistic about the Blazers if they guarantee Ariza's salary, bring back Melo at a reasonable number, actually use the non-taxpayers mid-level exception on somebody. And then I think that they are a much better team just by virtue of good health.
I think in answer to the question, I think it's a lot more likely that Indiana splits up Turner and Sabonis, and I think they should, and I think it should be Turner who goes. I mean, you talked about this on your last solo mailbag too, and you had some good thoughts on it. Turner clearly has the higher defensive upside. And this is just, I think, my bias towards passing big men, which is probably well noted by a lot of our listeners. I just think it opens up so much for you offensively when you have a big guy that can pass and sort of run the offense from the low and the high post the way Sabonis can. And I think statistically they've been better with Sabonis at the 5 than they have with Turner. So that I would not be at all surprised if that happened. I wouldn't be terribly shocked if McCollum was traded either, but there's been so many comments from people about how much Lillard loves playing with McCollum. And just that one would surprise me at least a little bit. And the Indiana one probably wouldn't surprise me at all. So I'll go with Indiana on that.
I think I'm with you too. Let's slide into tier 3, and you have to promise not to get mad because the Jazz are not in tier 1. I have the Jazz as my number 7 free agency destination, and the Houston Rockets as Houston Rockets are number 8. The Utah Jazz are number 7 in my tier 3. I call this the teams that we kind of know what they are, and I'm not sure how much better they can get with the non-taxpayers mid-level exception. In the Jazz's case, it feels like, to sort of borrow a phrase from Zach Lowe, that they're a half a player away from being like really legitimate title contenders. And then with the Rockets, I don't know what to expect as they continue to lean into micro ball. Are they even still doing that over the offseason? Is Daryl Morey still in charge? Is Mike D'Antoni coming back as a head coach? There's a lot going on there. But if they're going to play small, and we were just talking about how well Russell Westbrook is done, and maybe you can recite some of those numbers with the Rockets going small. If you're going to have him, that setup, plus James Harden, they're going to be in the thick of the championship discussion no matter what's going on with the front office and coaching personnel. So giving them the full non-taxpayers mid-level, assuming Mr. Cheapo, Tillman Fertitta, is willing to spend it. Fertitta, I can never pronounce his name wrong. It sounds like a pet hamster. I think I've told that to you before, that you would name
Fertitta. And isn't there a food item that's like a
Fertata?
Fertata? Yeah. So, I mean, I'm going to go with Fertitta. I don't know where I'm at on the actual discussion of basketball with them right now, though.
Yeah.
The discussion took me out of the loop there for a second.
Yeah, so he's like one part sounds like he's named after a food, but also a pet hamster. Moving on, the Jazz for me. Look, their whole outlook changes if Mike Conley can be the Mike Conley they thought they traded for, and
I'm becoming very dubious of that.
Yeah, it's not great, Bob. And so that really changes their own calculus because you have a season and max money committed to him next year. And so, yes, you can go use the non-taxpayers mid-level exception, but you're going to have to try and divvy that up among a couple players because Mike Conley is not the player that you thought you traded for. And
Yeah.
so both of these teams have move up potential, but I'm just not sure. They would have to do something incredibly good in the playoffs for me to buy into them being in front of any of the 6 teams that I'm about to go through.
I think that's totally fair. Do you think Morey and D'Antoni will be there if the Rockets? I guess it probably depends on how far they get. Like if they just flame out in round one, both of those guys are probably gone, right?
D'Antoni's definitely gone if they don't make it out of the first round. I kind of feel like D'Antoni won't be back unless they make the conference finals.
Yeah.
I don't know about Morey. I don't know how much goodwill he squandered within the organization with the whole China thing, and
with his stand for democracy.
Wait, what was that?
With his stand for democracy.
Yeah. It was. Look, the timing was still weird. We talked about that already, but I don't know how much goodwill he squandered within the organization. And then on top of that, like they've let him make these moves that are really going to affect the roster for years to come, giving up a first round pick in the Capella trade, extending Eric Gordon. Are they going to extend PJ Tucker? It'd just be really funny if he ends up paying all these guys, getting rid of all these picks, and then just bouncing.
It does kind of feel like I may not be long for this place. I'm gonna take this philosophy to the extreme because somebody else may have to deal with the ramifications. And I say that basically agreeing with everything they've done. Like I loved all the moves that they've made, and I think the micro ball era has made them more watchable. It's made them better statistically. I think what they're doing is smart. There is just a hint of like throwing caution to the wind with it too. So that's a huge factor, obviously, with them. Who knows, what the team philosophy is going to be by the time free agency rolls around. With Utah, I think Donovan Mitchell's a guy who probably has a little bit of pull with free agents around the league. Like it's always going to be hard to recruit players to come play in Utah. But they've already kind of turned that perception a little bit here in the last few years. The Bogdanovich signing was big. Believe it or not, like the Joe Johnson signing was kind of a moment for Utah just because
that was definitely a moment. I remember that. It was a moment.
Yeah. It may not seem like that in retrospect, and he did hit that game winner in the Clippers playoff series. So he had a moment too once he got to the Jazz. But it does seem like the Dennis Lindsey era, Justin Zanuck era, they're starting to change some of the perceptions around Utah as a free agency spot. Like it's never going to be the kind of place that'll be in on guys like, when LeBron comes up or anything like that. But Bogdanovich was a great signing for them. The Conley trade was widely praised at the time. It just hasn't worked out as people expected. So I do think they're an intriguing spot. I don't think it's some grave error to have them at number 7, though. It's still Utah, which is a place that a lot of NBA players aren't thrilled about. It's a small market. There's definitely things working against it. So I think 7 is definitely a fair spot for them.
With the way they've been playing recently, I might, and by might I mean probably most definitely put them behind the Portland Trailblazers.
Yeah, and here with the way that they've been playing recently too, I keep trying to tell myself that 2 weeks from now, this could be a distant memory. Like things change so quickly in the NBA. I think what will really matter is what they do in the playoffs, because I think that makes a much more lasting impression on free agency, than this difficult stretch that they're having in January and February.
That's for sure, and especially let's say they go up against the Rockets and they actually beat them this time. Like that
would be a lot.
Here now, all that said, I know you said things could change this summer. Mike Conley for CP3 straight up. Are you doing it?
I might still. No, I would. If they're both healthy going into the summer, I'd do that in a heartbeat. And I think it saves OKC a lot of money, so I can kind of see why they would do it too. But yeah, I'd do that.
Would you include anything, any sort of sweetener if OKC wanted it?
Definitely
not a future first round pick.
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't mind throwing some seconds in.
Um,
I don't. Second round picks are just such like wild cards to me anyway. I would do that.
yeah, but it's just crazy that that's the point that we've reached with Mike Conley now.
Yep, it really is. It has been rough. There's no question about that.
I am interested to see if the Jazz this changes their free agency appeal a little bit because it would change the capacity of who they would then sign. But depending on how much Jordan Clarkson costs, and assuming they're interested in bringing him back, they could still have the full MLE. But there's a chance that if he actually costs real money, more than the non-taxpayer mid-level exception itself, they wouldn't have to use that on him. Let me be clear. But if he costs more than those $9 or $10 million a year, now you have to worry about going into the tax, and you could still use the full MLE if you stay under the hard cap, but the Jazz are not a team that's going to pay the tax in my mind. So their interest level in bringing him back is something that I'm going to be watching over the summer as well.
Yeah, that's big for sure.
Tier 2, and two of these teams, the first two that I'm going to name, they have the potential to carve out more cap space. I just assume that, so let me just name them. That'll make it easier. Number 6, the Dallas Mavericks. I'm assuming that Tim Hardaway Jr. picks up his player option. Number 5, the New Orleans Pelicans. And I'm assuming that they won't renounce Derek Favors and all their free agents except for Brandon Ingram. That's how they would be that's how they could become a cap space team. And then number 4, the Denver Nuggets, who they're kind of just all over the place this summer when you look at some of the free agents they have. Paul Millsap is going into free agency. Mason Plumlee is going into free agency. Jeremy Grant has a player option. Torrey Craig is going to be a restricted free agent. So they have a lot of decisions to make. I just think they're a team that could drop down. I think in this tier, I could see them falling out of the tier if they just flame out in the playoffs, because the crux of this roster really isn't going anywhere. It's sort of the high end role players. When you look at what's going to happen with Grant, and if he opts out, how much is he going to command? Are you interested in bringing back Paul Millsap, who has been by and large, when he's healthy, fantastic for them defensively? So they're appealing to me if they make a deep playoff run. I think you have to do more than just win a playoff series. I think they would have to flirt with really getting to the conference finals, if not get there. But if you give them, like they should, and a lot of it depends on how much Millsap costs. I don't think they'll bring back Plumlee, would be my guess, at least not at a real number. And then how much will Jeremy Grant cost if he even opts out? If you give them the full MLE, they're a team that becomes super interesting. For Dallas, a lot of it hinges on what does Kristaps Porzingis look like the rest of the year. He's just been absolutely killing it over his past 12 games or so. Over exactly his last 12 games, 22.3 points, 8.5 rebounds, 2 assists, 1.4 blocks, slashing 47.2, 37.5, 86.7, and getting to the foul line at a very healthy clip. So that's a good sign. And the numbers with him and Luka on the floor together are getting better. So you factor in that, and then maybe the Mavericks do actually have those 2 young stars who are ready to compete now, and yet their window won't be closing anytime soon. And just for the Pelicans, I flirted with putting them higher, but it's, do you want to go play there if they're not going to make the playoffs this year? But you have Zion Williamson, you kept JJ Redick, you have Drew Holiday. Are we sure that both Holiday and Redick won't be traded? Maybe not, but you have Brandon Ingram. We have to assume they're going to re-sign him. Josh Hart is there. Lonzo Ball has been a little up and down this year. They just have so much talent where if you add a piece to this roster, maybe a truer wing, or if you're trying to get a different look at the 5, I feel like they vault from fringe playoff team to like really firmly entrenched in the postseason, like middle of the pack, like 3, 4, 5, 6 conversation. And so I could see the Nuggets falling, but I could see the Pelicans, even though I already have them at number 5, they could be a team that jumps even higher up to me.
Yeah, I think you could probably justify any order of these 3 teams, and I love these 3 teams. They all have really intriguing young duos. Luka and Porzingis, like you said, they're starting to figure out how to play with each other. Porzingis particularly has been fantastic the last few weeks. Took him a little while to kind of figure out his role and I think get his basketball legs back underneath him, but he's starting to look, I think, in some ways better than he ever did in New York. So that's huge. The Pelicans obviously have Zion and Ingram, and I think Lonzo Ball has been really good this year. He's maybe even been a little bit underrated this season. So they've got an intriguing young core, and ditto for the Nuggets. I don't know if people realize how young Jokic is. Still a pretty young guy. I'm looking it up right now. 25 years old. Jamal Murray's young too. So that's an interesting team to me too. I love all three of these teams. I could see free agents at basically any point in their career wanting to join any of these teams, whether you're an up and comer, whether you're someone who didn't work out on your first, rookie contract, whether you're a veteran who's now entering sort of the ring chasing phase of your career. I think all of these spots, or I think all of those class of free agents could look at all three of these teams and be intrigued for sure.
Honestly, the Pelicans should become a cap space team and re-sign Anthony Davis.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
Let's go. So tier one. Let's go through these teams one by one since there are only three left. I have number 3 is the Bucks, and I would put them at number 1 if you could tell me Giannis Antetokounmpo is going to sign his 5-year, $253.8 million mega deal in the summer. And I'm not sure if he will. I'm also not saying I think he'll request a trade because I don't think that he would, even if he doesn't sign it. I think you just sort of ride it out and play with him on the team through all of next season unless he requests a trade, and then you see where the chips fall in 2021. But I'm just looking at them. They're on pace for more than 70 victories right now. They are so deep. They have just Chris Middleton. I think he can be the number 2. When Giannis is your number 1, he can be the number 2 on a championship team. It's done. It's over with. I've decided. That's the answer. You've gotten a quality year from Eric Bledsoe. Brook Lopez has been fantastic defensively and in the post and kind of on drives. If he could hit his wide open threes at a higher clip, they're just so scary. Dante DiVincenzo, I think he's not getting enough sixth man of the year love. Just fills a lot of holes for them when you look at his defensive range and then all the things that he can do on the offensive end. Failing to get a long-term commitment from Antetokounmpo definitely would hurt because you're in Milwaukee to begin with, regardless of how much of a title favorite you are. And free agents that if they're looking at 2 or 3 or 4 year deals, they might not want to latch onto them if you can't guarantee that he'll be there. Still, this is a team that could be working off a championship and should have the non-taxpayers mid-level exception. If they win the title and he resigns, I might vault them into just the number 1 spot. Why wouldn't you want to play for this group right now? Again, the Milwaukee market, maybe that holds them back a little bit, but if you're playing with Antetokounmpo in the East with the supporting cast that he has right now, you're in a position to chasing a ring. And if you're a full MLE free agent, you're not necessarily taking a pay cut to do that unless they're going to look to divvy it up amongst multiple players.
I'm a little surprised they're at number 3.
Instead of higher or lower.
I thought they'd be higher. I completely understand why the number 1 team is where it is, and we'll talk about them in a minute. But I was surprised that Milwaukee was 3 when compared to the team at number 2. But I guess we'll get into that. And the reasons that I like Milwaukee as a free agent destination, you just laid them all out. So I don't really have a ton to add to that. I think they're a great free agent destination. They're going to be a perennial title contender. I guess the one big question mark kind of hanging over them is whether Giannis will be there, which you mentioned. But I don't know, call me a traditionalist or something, but I just kind of, I get the feeling he's going to stay there. I know that's exceptionally rare in today's NBA. I mean, player movement is just a constant in the league, but for some odd reason, I think he's going to be one of those guys who's, if not a Bucks lifer or not a lifer with the first team that he goes to, he'll be there for a while. I think they're just incredibly appealing.
So what holds them back is Giannis is going to be there next season, and I'm like you. I have a feeling he's going to stay there for the long term. But I think the fact that there's a chance maybe he doesn't sign the Supermax, and then there's also the chance that when you look at just the brass, that they might not want to spend the full MLE because we know that they're concerned about how much they're spending on this team. Yeah. That's what holds them back more for me. If they win the title or if he resigns, or if he signs the extension, they get to number 2 at least for me.
Okay.
My actual number 2 team though, the Toronto Raptors, and shout out to @_Emmer J Brown, a prominent part of Raptors Twitter, for screen grabbing our last podcast where we were talking about random fad base category. So I think that's the first time that's happened where you or I haven't been the one to screen grab the audio of the podcast. We're in for more of that. But so for the Raptors, the reason why I have them at number 2, and people are going to say, well, who's going to go to Toronto? Kawhi left. Here's what I'll say. Look, Kyle Lowry stayed and has basically had the chance to leave twice, because you look at him re-signing in free agency and then he signs the extension. They've won a title. You have Pascal Siakam. You have Masai Ujiri, who is no longer a risk to leave for the Knicks, and he apparently never was a risk to leave for the Knicks. And what I really think also helps them is, so yes, they have the 2021 cap space plans, and maybe that makes them a little bit less attractive for guys who are looking for multi-year deals. But they, sort of like the Heat, they do have a little bit of wiggle room there. If you're going to pay top dollar for Fred VanVleet, maybe not as much. You can't afford to give out a big long-term contract and pay him and Siakam and then go after a Giannis in 2021. But just looking at how good they've been this year, looking at the fact that maybe they're able to bring back a Gasol or an Ibaka sort of on, quote-unquote hometown discounts now, I think it's huge. And yeah, you know what? Toronto might not be the most desirable market to play in right now, but all it takes is one person to make the decision that it is. And we're in a summer where there's not going to be a ton of cap space floating around, and there's actually a chance that they have it, which is also why I have them at number 2, because they could technically, if someone overpays Fred VanVleet, I don't think Ujiri will hesitate to let him walk, and you don't have to bring back Gasol or Ibaka, so you could actually have cap space this summer. And I'm not saying they should use it all. There's definitely no one aside from Anthony Davis I would be in favor of them maxing out this year, but maybe they're, a 2 or 3 3-year submax deal. They're a team that could do that. And just with the way that they've responded to the Kawhi Leonard departure, Danny Green departure, bringing in guys like Rondae Hollis-Jefferson, Terrence Davis, Chris Boucher, and having them be valuable parts of the rotation. And just knowing that unless they make a trade, Kyle Lowry's going to be there, Pascal Siakam's going to be there, this team should be appealing, particularly this summer more so than most. If you want to quibble over whether they'll be a superstar destination in 2021, you know what, I'll listen to that right now. But relative to this summer, when the money's just going to be equal in so many places and there's a finite amount of MLEs to go around, I think that they're going to be the second most attractive team there. And maybe that changes if they refuse to give out multi-year contracts, but they don't have to be in a position to do that.
I think you almost sold me.
You want the Jazz at number 2? I was waiting for this.
What I kept thinking towards the end of that was I think Milwaukee's trump card is the fact that they're just a much more legitimate title contender to me.
Fair.
And I don't know. I guess I wouldn't be stunned if Toronto got to the NBA Finals. I probably would be stunned if they won it all again. That would be one of the craziest
Is that the
stories.
most unlikely title in NBA history at that point?
Yeah, that I was going to say that would be legitimately shocking.
Like last year was kind of the most random title in NBA history.
Yeah.
And this year they could have.
And I was one of the many people who thought as soon as Kawhi left, they're just going to be battling for 5th, 6th, 7th next season. So they're already an awesome story, and I think they are going to be a desirable spot. Not just next summer. I think probably as long as Masai Ujiri is there, they're going to be a spot that free agents will look at. They're just such a well-run organization right now. But for me, I think I'm probably still going to put Milwaukee at number 2, just because I think as long as Giannis is there, they are a very, very real threat to win the title. And I think a lot of free agents will take that into account.
Maybe I'm discounting the potential for them to finally make the pivot this summer, where if you let Ibaka and Gasol walk and maybe you look at trading Lowry.
For a little bit.
Would you put them below any of the teams in tier 2? Because I think if you're the case that you made is convincing to me too. So I think maybe you could talk yourself into putting them below the Nuggets and the Pelicans if you really wanted to as well.
Yeah, I honestly think you could make an argument for any of those 3 teams that we discussed in the earlier tier, the Mavericks, the Pelicans, and the Nuggets, to be up into that top 3. I think for free agents, it might even be the Mavericks and the Pelicans. I think those guys, I think Zion and Luka might carry a little bit more cachet with free agents than Jokic does, which is probably shouldn't be the case, because if you play with Jokic, you're going to get set up a ton. I guess the same goes for Luka too.
Yeah, you can do pull-ups on Zion's biceps, so why wouldn't you want to play?
Yeah. So All three of those teams are appealing to me. I think if it was me, I'd probably have those squads from like the Mavericks, the Pelicans, the Nuggets, and the Raptors might be their own tier, and then the Bucks and the Lakers would be the final one. Spoiler alert, in case you didn't already figure out what you said about yet.
Yeah, maybe I'm also underestimating how much NBA players won't want to leave the country. I'm sticking with them at number 2. I think if Kawhi Leonard was going to prioritize basketball fit, he would have stayed in Toronto to begin with. So this is the summer for me to step out on the number 2 limb. Number 1 is no surprise, the Los Angeles Lakers. And I almost feel like we've reached the point where the Lakers might be a little bit underrated, where everyone just feels like they're this regular season team that is going to have these glaring holes in the playoffs. Maybe that ends up being the case, but give LeBron James's team the non-taxpayer mid-level exception with Anthony Davis. I feel like they could turn that into a really good player. What's that?
Yeah. Tons of people are going to want to sign there. They have the inherent advantage of there will be a lot of free agents who would sign the mid-level in LA and nowhere else.
Yeah, I wish I had a name that sprung to mind for the mid-level right now, but the market's just so all over the place. We went through certain names last time, but if the fact that the money's equal, or in let's say 2/3 of the league, the money's going to be equal or less elsewhere for most of it, and that the Lakers are going to be in the majority, you would expect them to maybe. I don't know if they look to split it up, but you would expect them to maybe sign a player who could get slightly more, maybe from a cap space team, just for the chance to play with LeBron, who doesn't look like he's aging at all, and Anthony Davis. And maybe a lot does depend on how well they do in the playoffs this season, but I feel like they've reached the point where they might be a little bit underrated. Like, we've just assumed that they have these huge holes, and it does seem like they have them where, they need more shooting, they need to play Rondo less. How do you survive the LeBron-less minutes? They have the second best record in the damn league.
Yeah. Yeah, and I actually find myself still every time I talk about the Bucks, I want to pick them to win the title, but there's a little piece of me that thinks LeBron's done it multiple times and Kawhi's done it multiple times. They've gone all the way, and so it's hard to discount that. The Lakers are a juggernaut, and I do think players are going to be willing to play there for less. We talked about this a lot more on the last podcast that we did. But like you just mentioned, the free agent class is just very underwhelming this summer. So who that guy is that potentially signs for the mid-level this summer, maybe it's not someone who really moves the needle a ton. But like you said, the Lakers might be underrated, and they might not need a guy who moves the needle a ton. I mean, they've already got LeBron James and Anthony Davis. It's just about finding good complementary players at this point, and they can absolutely get that with the mid-level exception. So them at number 1 makes total sense. They're the Lakers. They've got LeBron. They're going to be a desirable place here for the foreseeable future.
The last thing I'll say is I think he ends up getting more from his current team or doesn't want to leave his current team, but Joe Harris on this team would be absolutely wild.
That would be ridiculous.
That would be a good use of the MLE for them.
Yeah. All right. We have officially previewed 2020 free agency, talked about all 30 teams for you. If you want to quibble with any of Dan's rankings or our takes, you can find us on Twitter. Dan's at Dan Favale, Favale. I'm at Andrew D. Bailey. The show is at Hardwood Knocks. The podcast network at Blue Wire Pods. As always, we encourage you to rate, review, and subscribe to the show. And if you've already done that, tell your friends, family, neighbors, and acquaintances to do so. And until next time, we'll leave you with the shout out to Benno Udry and Kyle Anderson.